Do you have a pile of quilt blocks laying around that all have different sizes and you don't know how to combine them into a quilt? I was at that point yesterday, and now I have a quilt top finished with all of those blocks combined. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I did that. And there I have my first piece of the puzzle. I just wanted to try it out for myself, so now I can explain how you can assemble such a messy quilt with blocks in all different shapes. So if you have a lot of test blocks lying around, or blocks from a sampler which have different sizes, here's how I would approach it to combine all the blocks. So what you first need to do is make a little bit of a shuffle in the blocks so that you have different sections. So what I started with was making this section. So I drew an imaginary line over here. So now I can assemble these blocks into one row. Because these three blocks are also a little bit tricky, but you can approach it like this. You can add a section here, section here, section here, so that you make this block bigger until it matches here. And you make this block bigger until it lines up over here. And then you can just make this a bit bigger, and then you assemble the three of them. So then you have one bigger part. And that is how you go for all the blocks. So I just enlarged this block to have a width of 15 inches. And I'm going to do the same with this one. So this one doesn't need a border at the top because I already have it over here. It just needs a blue piece over here, a blue piece over here, and a section over here. So then it's enlarged to fit this strip of 15-inch wide. So then bit by bit you assemble everything. So I've thought it through for this part, but for the remaining part I haven't figured it out yet. Oh, and what I did on the paper was I just wrote the strip that I am going to start with, and that it is 15 inches wide, and I've sketched in the different blocks so that I can fill in how big of a section I'm going to add. Okay, but now for this part I want to give it a as much as a unstructured look as possible, but still be able to sew it together. So let's see, where are we going to cut it in pieces? It's a bit tricky. I mix it up so well that it's really good and unorganized. Yeah, I guess I could move this over to here, because then I have a block over here that I can sew together. I guess this is a good start, because now I can assemble this row and this row and this row. And then the only thing is, when I want to assemble this as a row, I have that one in the way. I guess I could choose to lower this a bit higher, make this a little bit higher, and then lower this until it matches up with this line. I guess that could work. Still looks okay, right? Yeah. So what I've done now is that I've structured it. So here we have a row, I can assemble that, and here we have a row which I can assemble, and here we have a row that I can assemble, and then this whole part I can assemble, and this part. That is just great. So that's in manageable chunks, so that should work. Yeah, looks good to me. So I'm just going to follow this plan. So I'm going to start with that side border. Done. I only need to do this last piece, and for that piece I'm going to show you exactly how I'm doing it and how you're measuring, because yesterday I started, but I didn't do the calculation of the width of the strips correctly. So let me show you how I do it. I only have this piece left to do, so I need to add strips around the blocks, and I'm going to start with this one. So what I do is I measure the space between two blocks. So when I will measure this, there is 2.5 inches over there. And then yesterday I thought, well, I'll just add 1/2 inch seam allowance and then it will fit. But that's not completely true, because you're not sewing over here or over here, but you're sewing 1/4 inch inward. So on both sides you should add 1/4 inch and then add 1/2 inch seam allowance. So the gap might be 2.5 inches, but the space between from where you are going to sew and where you are going to sew, that is bigger. So what I do here is I measure the space between two blocks and then I add 1 inch. So this is 2.5 inches. So that would make 3.5 inches over there. And then over here we have the same. So this is also just a gap between two pieces. So I measure it 2 inches and 1/4 inch. So the space between these two is 2 inches and 1/4 inch. So I need to add 1 inch. That makes it 3 inches and 1/4 inch. And then on the top I don't have a different piece to measure to, but I have the edge over here to measure to. And I don't have to add 1/4 inch seam allowance above this part. So that leaves me with only seam allowance on this side. So when I measure this is 2 inches and 1/4 inch. Then I up till the yellow edge over here. So then I only need to add 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to use 2 inches and 3/4 inch. So that is how I measure it. Let me show you how I'm going to cut it and sew it. So I have my notes of my measurements and my block, and on my notes I also have the direction of which the block was on my design wall, so that I know that it should not be like that, but it should be like this. And then I'll just look at my notes and see what sizes I need. So I have one piece over here that is 2 inches and 3/4 inch. And I've cut a lot of strips already. So these are all strips with different widths. And I'm going to look for one that is 3 inches. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so I'm going to scale this down to 2 3/4 inch and add this to my block. So first I'll just measure the width of my block. There we go. Place this back, and then I didn't need 3 inches, but I needed 2 3/4 inch. There we have it. Let's check again. The direction of my arrow was this way, and it should be on the top. Looks good, so let's sew this. Giving it a quick press, so it should be like this. and I have the top border done. Then I have a 3 1/4 inch border over here and a 3 1/2 over here. So let's see what I have laying around here. Yeah, this is 3 1/4 inch. That is perfect. So let's place that on the bottom. There we go. So now I've set the height of the row that I'm making. So I'm just going to measure that so I can write it down. That is 10 3/4 of an inch. I'm just going to put that in my notes so I can use it for the other 2 blocks in this row. 10 3/4 of an inch. Okay, let's add the 3 1/2 inch strip. How big is this? This is 4 inch, so I'm just going to use this one. 3 1/2 inches. And it needs to be 10 3/4. Yes. Perfect. This is going to go over here. That looks great. So let's take my block, ruler, pen and notes to the design row. There it is, the first part of this row. And I can already see that I've measured it correctly on the bottom, because this should be 1/2 inch overlapping. And that is just about fine, right? So this one should be the same height, and this should be 1/2 inch overlapping. So that's perfect. Let's move on to the next block. And this one was positioned at the bottom, so I'm just going to place it down a little bit. There we go. And also this should be overlapping 1/2 inch. So roughly is good enough. And I just measured that this is 10 inches and 3/4. So I don't have to measure this, because I already know that in total it should be 10 inches and 3/4. So I'm just going to measure that on my cutting board. Only need to measure this, and this is 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to write that down to 1 inch and 3/4. And there's no border at the bottom, so I can go ahead and fix this one. There it goes. And then I have my final piece to measure. And what I did for these 2 sections, so this section and this section, they are already joined. That I made this just a little bit extra wide, so then I can sew them together, lining up these 2 sides, and then I'll just trim it off. That saves me from exactly measuring how wide this is and how wide this is. So I'm just going to measure this, measure this, and make it just a little bit extra wide. Let me first measure this part. That is 1, 2, 3 1/4 inch. So we go for 4 1/4 inch. And this part I don't have to measure, because it's going to be 11 3/4. No, what was it? Yeah, 11 3/4 wide. And then I need to measure this part. That is 1, 2, 3, 4 1/2 inches. So when I would do it exactly, I would make it 5 inches. So 4 1/2 plus 1/2 inch seam allowance. So let's make that 5 1/2 plus inches. Let's go. And there we have the final one. Yeah, the height is correct, and you see that it's a little bit bigger over there. So I'm going to sew these 3 together, and then I can join it to this part. Oh, it's done. I really like that I went for a dark color on the background. I always like to go for white, but I guess it's a bit boring to use in everything, so I'm happy that I used this color over here. Also funny to see that these flying geese disappear in the background, and also with this one and this one. I like it that the color is the same, so nicely blends in. What I was planning to do was make a border around it with dark blue arrows pointing outwards, and I think that's still a nice idea, but I'm going to save that for a different video. So that's it for this week's video. I love how it turned out. Next week I'm going to add a border around it with the outward pointing arrows. I hope that's going to look good. And then it's finished and I can start quilting it, which is going to be free motion quilting. That's it for now. I hope you liked this video. If so, please give a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. So go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week again. Bye bye!